Laura Kingsley was the perfect housewife. Tyler Henson was the boy next door. Their secret affair shattered a quiet suburb and ended with a body buried in the woods. Laura Kingsley had the kind of life many envied from a distance. A well-kept house on Maple Drive, 2 polite children in private school, and a husband, Martin, who provided more than comfortably for his family. Their white 2-story home was framed by trimmed hedges and seasonal flower beds, the type that showed up on real estate brochures. Neighbors waved as she passed, and she always waved back, offering warm smiles that masked a creeping hollowness inside her. Every morning, Laura went through the motions, packing lunches, folding laundry, sweeping the porch, and baking things. She never actually ate. Her life was structured, predictable, and suffocating. The days blurred into one another, each as forgettable as the last. Martin left for work early, returned late, and spoke in half-sentences about meetings and numbers. Their conversations had shrunk to logistical updates, soccer schedules, grocery lists, overdue bills. Next door, the Hensons were the opposite, quiet, reserved, and rarely seen. Their son, Tyler, had just come home for the summer from college. 19, lean and athletic, he carried the ease of someone untouched by routine. He often mowed lawns around the neighborhood, offering cheap rates to anyone who didn't want to brave the heat. That's how it started. The first time Laura spoke to him, he was pushing a mower across her yard. She brought him water, and he thanked her with a grin that lingered a bit too long. It was harmless at first, but it became a habit. He'd show up without being asked, linger on the porch for idle talk, then disappear before Martin pulled into the driveway. He was attentive, curious, and made her feel visible again. That was something she hadn't felt in years. The neighbors took no notice. Hillridge was a place where people kept their heads down. They shared casseroles, but not secrets. Even Michelle, Laura's closest friend on the block, didn't suspect anything more than boredom in her friend's distracted tone. Everyone assumed Laura had it all together, because women like her always did. But inside her home, and inside herself, things were beginning to unravel. Tyler started coming around more often. He texted her. She responded. Quickly, they slipped into something they couldn't name and couldn't stop. Their conversations deepened, grew more flirtatious, and turned into stolen moments inside her kitchen, then inside her bedroom. They were careful, but not cautious. The thrill was too intoxicating. Each day, Laura crossed invisible lines she once thought she'd never approach. She told herself it wasn't serious, that it would fade when summer ended. But Tyler wasn't thinking about endings. To him, this wasn't a fling, it was something real. The boy next door had fallen in love with the woman trapped inside her own perfect life. What neither of them realized was how fragile that illusion really was, and how close it was to shattering. The affair had begun like a whisper in a quiet house, but it would soon echo through the entire neighborhood. And someone, somewhere, had already started watching. The affair between Laura Kingsley and Tyler Henson quickly evolved from fleeting glances and hushed conversations to something deeper, riskier, and far more dangerous. With Martin often away on business and the kids at summer camps or sleepovers, opportunity wasn't hard to come by. What had started as innocent flirtation now consumed them both. They became addicted to the secrecy, the thrill of being together without being caught. For Laura, it was like stepping into another life, one where she felt seen, wanted, and alive. For Tyler, it was the first time he'd felt powerful, chosen by someone so far beyond his years. Their meetings became routine. Laura would leave, the back door unlocked at night, and Tyler would slip in after his parents were asleep. Sometimes they met at a nearby motel off the highway under fake names. They left no paper trail, no credit card charges. She paid in cash. He never asked questions. They spoke in codes through text messages, deleted everything, and stayed out of sight. But no amount of caution could keep their secret buried forever. Tyler began to grow more possessive. What started as an affair soon became an obsession. He talked about moving away together, about Laura leaving Martin and starting a new life with him. He fantasized aloud about small towns, shared apartments, and how they'd finally be free. At first, Laura brushed it off, thinking it was just youthful, dreaming. But the more he insisted, the more she began to feel the weight of their situation. Guilt crept in like a slow-moving fog, not just for the betrayal of her husband and children, but for how far she'd let things spiral. She found herself checking the windows more often, flinching when her phone buzzed, and waking in cold sweats. The affair that once brought her to life now filled her with dread. She started pulling away, canceling their meetings, taking longer to reply. Tyler noticed. His messages became more desperate, more intense. He accused her of using him, of pretending to care. He threatened to tell her husband everything if she didn't meet him. Laura, afraid of what he might do, tried to reason with him. But Tyler had crossed a line. He no longer cared about discretion. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. One afternoon, a plain white envelope appeared on the Kingsleys' doorstep. Inside were photos, Laura and Tyler together in intimate settings. Her bedroom, his car, the motel. The images were grainy, some clearly taken without their knowledge. She froze, hands shaking, heart pounding. There was no note, no name, no explanation. Just evidence. She hid the envelope, burned the contents in the fireplace, and checked every corner of the house for cameras. Fear settled into her bones. Had someone been following them? Was it Michelle? One of the neighbors? Or worse, was Tyler behind it all? The perfect life Laura once portrayed was crumbling, and she could feel it slipping through her fingers. The affair wasn't a secret anymore. Someone knew, and someone wanted her to pay. The fear that followed the arrival of the envelope never left Laura. It lingered in every room she walked through, every glance she exchanged with neighbors, every time Martin looked at her a second too long. The photos had changed everything. Whoever had sent them knew what they were doing. The message was clear. You're being watched, and your secret is no longer safe. Laura's days became filled with paranoia. She drew the blinds, ignored Tyler's texts, and avoided going outside unless absolutely necessary. Her world, once built on control and appearances, had become a cage of anxiety. Tyler, on the other hand, was unraveling in a different way. The silence from Laura sent him into a tailspin. He couldn't understand how she could turn cold so quickly. One day they were making promises, the next she was ignoring him like he didn't exist. He sent message after message, each one more emotional than the last. When she didn't answer, he started leaving notes in her mailbox, on her windshield, even sliding one under her front door. They weren't threatening at first. They were pleading, confused, wounded. But as days passed, the tone shifted. Tyler was angry now, feeling used and discarded. He believed Laura had played with his feelings, then tossed him aside to return to her safe, quiet life. Then one night, Tyler went missing. His parents reported it the next morning. They hadn't seen him since the previous evening, when he'd said he was going for a walk. His phone went straight to voicemail. His wallet was still in his room. Police organized a search around the woods that bordered the neighborhood. Volunteers combed through trails, ditches, and nearby streets, but there was no trace of him. The town, usually untouched by tragedy, was stunned. Posters with his photo appeared on street lamps and store windows. Local news ran stories about the disappearance of the promising young college student. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and classmates. When they spoke to Laura, she kept her answers short and carefully measured. Yes, she knew Tyler. He mowed their lawn. No, she hadn't seen him in days. She expressed concern, offered sympathy, and returned to her home where panic clawed at her from the inside. She knew what the detectives didn't. This wasn't a random disappearance. Something had gone terribly wrong. Tyler's room became a focal point in the investigation. That's where they found it, his journal. In it were pages filled with entries about Laura, some romantic, others confused and increasingly dark. He had written about their affair, detailed their meetings, and even hinted that he was considering telling Martin everything. The final entry was the most chilling. It mentioned one last meeting with Laura, scheduled the night he disappeared. He wrote that he believed she was trying to end things for good, and he wouldn't let that happen without a fight. Police began to shift their attention. What started as a missing person case was now looking more like something else entirely. Suspicion was forming, quiet but steady, and Laura was at the center of it. As investigators dug deeper into Tyler's disappearance, the pieces began to form a pattern, one that pointed in a direction no one in the neighborhood wanted to believe. Laura Kingsley, once seen as the graceful and soft-spoken heart of Maple Drive, was now under a growing cloud of suspicion. The journal entries discovered in Tyler's room raised more than a few eyebrows. Detectives traced the timeline, matching his emotional writings to known dates and events, building a picture of a volatile relationship hidden behind picket fences and porch lights. Neighbors were quietly questioned. Some mentioned seeing Tyler and Laura together more often than seemed appropriate. One even recalled a heated argument outside her garage weeks earlier. Michelle Carter, once Laura's closest friend, told detectives that Laura had grown distant in recent months and had started behaving strangely, closing the curtains during the day, avoiding social gatherings, becoming visibly agitated when asked about Tyler. Michelle didn't want to believe it, but even she admitted something had changed. Then came the breakthrough no one was prepared for. A local hiker reported a foul smell near the wooded trail about 5 miles from the Kingsley home. Search teams were dispatched immediately. Within hours, the remains of Tyler Henson were discovered in a shallow grave, partially covered with branches and soil. He had been dead for days. The medical examiner later confirmed blunt force trauma to the head as the cause of death. The community's shock turned to outrage. Vigils were held, candles lit, but grief quickly transformed into questions. Who would do this? And why? Detectives returned to Laura's home, this time with a warrant. They searched every corner, looking for anything that could tie her to the scene. In the garage, tucked behind old paint cans, they found a tire iron with traces of blood on it. Forensics confirmed it matched Tyler's DNA. The walls of her carefully curated life collapsed in an instant. Laura was arrested 2 days later and charged with second-degree murder. The news spread like wildfire. A respected housewife accused of killing her teenage neighbor. Media trucks crowded the street. Reporters camped out on lawns and commentators speculated endlessly on motive. Prosecutors painted the story as one of a woman desperate to keep her reputation intact. When Tyler threatened to expose the affair, they argued, Laura saw only one way out: eliminate the problem before it destroyed everything she had built. Laura maintained her innocence. Through her lawyer, she claimed that Tyler had grown unstable, that she had tried to end things and he had become threatening. She admitted to the affair, but insisted she never intended harm. The tire iron, she said, was planted or mishandled. She denied meeting Tyler the night he disappeared, but the evidence was mounting, and the court of public opinion had already passed judgment. Her neighbors turned cold. Michelle refused to visit. Even Martin, stunned and heartbroken, took the children and moved out of town. Laura's life was no longer perfect, no longer quiet. It was unraveling, thread by thread, in full view of the world. The trial of Laura Kingsley gripped the town like a vice, drawing crowds to the courthouse steps and dominating headlines for weeks. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension as each witness took the stand, each piece of evidence pulling back the curtain on a secret life hidden in plain sight. Prosecutors presented a compelling narrative: a woman trapped in her own lies, desperate to silence the one person who could destroy the illusion she had so carefully maintained. The jury heard about the affair in detail, how it had started, where they met, and how it had escalated into something dangerously obsessive. Tyler's journal entries were read aloud, each page revealing his growing fixation and Laura's cold withdrawal. Text messages retrieved from a cloud backup, thought to be deleted, showed a timeline of her distancing herself from him and his increasingly agitated responses. The prosecution pointed to motive: self-preservation. They argued that Laura feared her husband finding out, feared losing her family, her status, her life. And when Tyler threatened to expose it all, she chose murder over shame. Laura's defense told a different story. They painted Tyler as a troubled young man who became emotionally unstable after being rejected. Her attorney argued that Laura had tried to end things gracefully, but Tyler wouldn't let go. They suggested he had grown violent, that she feared for her safety. There were no witnesses to the murder, no video footage, and no clear forensic evidence proving Laura had struck the fatal blow. The tire iron, they claimed, could have been used by anyone. Her fingerprints weren't found on it, and no blood was discovered inside the house. The case, they said, was built on speculation and emotion, not proof. But the damage to Laura's image was irreversible. The woman once seen as polished and poised now appeared pale, tired, and hollow in court. She rarely spoke, her expression unreadable as former neighbors testified against her, recounting things they had previously ignored or overlooked. The betrayal ran deep. Not just the betrayal of her marriage, but of the entire community who had trusted and admired her. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation: guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the decision. Laura didn't cry, didn't flinch. She stood motionless as the weight of the sentence settled on her shoulders. She was sentenced to 25 years, in prison without the possibility of parole. In the weeks that followed, the media slowly moved on, the camera crews disappeared, and the street returned to its quiet routine. The Kingsley house was sold. Michelle Carter never spoke publicly about her former friend again. The Hensons placed a small memorial near the woods where Tyler was found, a wooden bench with his name carved into it and a plaque that read, "Gone too soon, never forgotten." Laura's name faded from headlines, but in Hillridge, Her story became legend, a reminder that behind even the most perfect windows, darkness can thrive.